The halls of St. Joseph's Hospital echoed with the hum of machines, and the faint shuffle of nurses rushing from room to room. Dr. Adrian, Hayes adjusted his white coat as he glanced over the patient, file in his hand. He was known as one of the hospital's best oncologists, calm, precise, and unshaken even in the face of the cruelest battles against cancer. But the file he held now made him pause. Emily Parker, 24 years old, diagnosed with advanced lymphoma, first chemotherapy session scheduled. Adrian exhaled, preparing himself. He opened the door to room 214, expecting fear, tears, or denial. Instead, he found a young woman sitting upright in bed, a sketchbook on her lap, drawing flowers with delicate strokes. Her hair, though thinning, still framed her face with a kind of stubborn grace. She looked up, smiling faintly. "You must be the doctor who's going to save me," she said. Adrian blinked at her boldness. "I'll do everything in my power to help you," he replied, setting the chart down. "Well, that's good," Emily said, her eyes twinkling despite the IV line in her arm. "Because I've got a long list of things to do once I beat this." He raised an eyebrow, curiosity tugging at him. "Like what? Open a bakery, travel Route 66, maybe even fall in love if I get the chance." Adrian chuckled softly. Most patients avoided talk of the future, afraid of tempting fate. Emily, however, spoke as if the world was still waiting for her, and somehow it stirred something in him. The first few days passed in a blur of treatments, medications, and late-night rounds, but Adrian found himself lingering in room 214 more than any other. Emily would ask him about his favorite books, his favorite songs, even his childhood dreams. He tried to keep it professional, but she had a way of breaking through his walls. One rainy evening, Emily caught him staring out the window, lost in thought. "Why do you always look so serious?" she asked playfully. "Because I have to," Adrian replied. "This job, it doesn't leave much room for mistakes." She tilted her head, studying him. "Or maybe it doesn't leave much room for living." Her words hit him harder than he expected. For years, Adrian had given his life to medicine, shutting out everything else. But now with Emily, he was starting to feel something he hadn't felt in a long time. Alive. Still, he reminded himself of the unspoken rule. Doctors don't fall in love with patients. But late at night, when he thought about her laughter echoing in the quiet halls, he realized it was already too late. The days after Emily's first treatment were hard. Chemotherapy hit her body like a storm. Nausea, fatigue, and moments when even sitting up felt like lifting a mountain. Yet she never lost that faint spark in her hazel eyes. Dr. Adrian Hayes kept close watch, adjusting her medications, ensuring her vitals remained stable. But more than that, he found himself watching her. The way she forced a smile through the pain. The way she held onto her sketchbook as if it were her anchor to normalcy. One afternoon, he entered her room to find her, painting small watercolor, flowers on the corner of a page. The IV tube trailed from her hand, but she ignored it, completely absorbed in her work. "You should be resting," Adrian said, folding his arms. Emily looked up, grinning. "Resting is boring. Painting makes me forget I'm sick." He walked closer, glancing at her drawing. The flowers were vibrant, full of life, in sharp contrast to the sterile hospital room. "You're talented," he admitted. She smirked. "Wow, a compliment from the great Dr. Hayes. I should frame this moment." Adrian laughed softly, something he rarely did in the hospital. "You like teasing me, don't you?" "Someone has to. You're way too serious." Their banter became a daily ritual. Between treatments and blood tests, Emily would challenge him with questions about life outside the hospital, about what he liked, about his dreams. At first, he kept his answers short, careful not to blur the lines. But over time, the walls he had built around himself began to crack. He told her about his childhood in a small town in Ohio, how he had always wanted to be a surgeon like his father, and how medicine had consumed his life, leaving little room for anything else. Emily listened intently, her eyes never leaving his face. One evening, when the ward was unusually quiet, Emily asked the question that made his heart stutter. "Adrian, have you ever been in love?" He hesitated, caught off guard by the intimacy of the question. "Once," he admitted finally. "But it didn't last. This job, it takes everything out of you. It doesn't leave much space for personal things." Emily nodded, her expression unreadable. Then she whispered, "I've never been in love." "Not really. Sometimes I wonder what it feels like to matter that much to someone." Adrian's chest tightened. He wanted to tell her that she mattered already, that her laughter, her courage, her presence had started to mean more to him than he ever thought possible. But the words stuck in his throat. Instead, he simply said, "You will. I promise." Emily smiled faintly, closing her eyes. If you say so, Dr. Hayes, I'll believe you. As he sat there watching her drift into sleep, Adrian realized he was no longer just her doctor. Somewhere in between the treatments and conversations, he had crossed an invisible line, and there was no turning back. The following week brought new challenges. Emily's hair had begun to fall out in uneven clumps, a cruel reminder of the poison running through her veins. She tried to laugh it off in front of the nurses, even joking, "Guess I'll save money on shampoo now." But when Adrian entered her room that evening, he noticed the way her eyes lingered on the mirror too long, her smile a little too forced. "Rough day?" he asked gently, setting her chart aside. Emily shrugged. "Just saying goodbye to pieces of myself. It's silly, right? It's only hair." Adrian sat on the edge of the chair beside her bed, his gaze steady. "It's not silly. You're allowed to feel what you feel." Her lips quivered, but she tried to keep her composure. "Do you ever wonder if people will still see you the same after you change?" "I don't want to be remembered as the sick girl who lost everything." Something inside him cracked. Without thinking, he reached for her hand, the contact sending a jolt through both of them. "Emily," he said quietly, "when I look at you, I don't see cancer. I see a fighter. I see someone who's stronger than most people I've ever met." Her breath caught, and for a moment she couldn't look away. "You always know the right thing to say, don't you?" He smiled faintly. "Not always, but I mean this." That night, Emily decided to shave off what little hair remained. She asked the nurse for clippers, but when Adrian walked in and saw her struggling, he gently took them from her hand. "Let me," he said softly. She hesitated, searching his face, then nodded. With slow, careful strokes, Adrian trimmed away the last strands. Emily watched her reflection, her heart pounding, not from fear but from the intimacy of the moment. When he finished, she looked at herself in the mirror. For the first time, she saw not weakness but courage staring back. "You're beautiful," Adrian whispered, almost without realizing he'd said it aloud. Emily turned to him, her eyes glistening. "You're not supposed to say things like that, Dr. Hayes." "I know," he admitted, his voice low. "But I couldn't stop myself." The silence between them was charged, filled with words neither dared to speak. Finally, Emily broke it with a soft laugh. "You're terrible at boundaries." Adrian chuckled, shaking his head. "Maybe you're right." From that moment, something shifted. Their conversations grew deeper, their silences more meaningful. Emily began to wait for his visits, and Adrian found excuses to linger longer than necessary. Both knew the line they were crossing, yet neither could walk away. One night, as he prepared to leave, Emily called after him. "Adrian, promise me something." He paused at the door. "What?" "Don't give up on me. Even if things get worse, don't treat me like I'm already gone." His chest tightened and he nodded slowly. "I promise." And for the first time in years, Adrian meant every word with his whole heart. Winter crept into the city, and the hospital windows fogged with condensation as the heaters struggled to keep the chill away. Emily's condition wavered. Some days she felt strong enough to walk the corridors with her IV pole. Other days she could barely sit up. Through it all, Adrian remained by her side, balancing the fine line between doctor and something more. One evening, after finishing his rounds, he found her sitting in the small hospital garden wrapped in a blanket, staring up at the stars. The cold bit at his skin, but she looked peaceful, her shaved head glowing softly under the moonlight. "You'll catch a cold out here," Adrian said, sitting beside her. Emily smiled. "If cancer hasn't killed me yet, I doubt the weather will." He shook his head, amused and frustrated all at once. "You always have a comeback, don't you?" "Maybe," she said softly. "But really, I just needed air. Sometimes these walls make me feel like I'm trapped. Out here I can pretend I'm normal." For a moment neither spoke. The night was still, the world around them fading until it felt like they were the only two people alive. Finally, Emily whispered, "Do you ever think about the future, Adrian? Like where you'll be 5 years from now?" He hesitated. "I used to, but somewhere along the way I stopped. Life became about patients, treatments, statistics, not dreams." She turned her head to look at him. "That sounds lonely." "It is," he admitted quietly. Her gaze softened. "Then maybe you should start dreaming again. Maybe you should live for more than just your work." The words lingered between them, heavy with meaning. Adrian wanted to tell her that she had already become his dream, that somehow she had filled the empty spaces inside him without even trying. But the weight of his position kept the confession locked away. Instead, he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small paper bag. "I brought you something." Emily's eyes lit up as she peeked inside. "Chocolate!" she gasped, grinning like a child. He laughed. "Don't tell the nurses. It's technically against the diet chart." She broke off a piece and offered it to him. Then were partners in crime. As their fingers brushed, a spark traveled up his arm, and he realized how dangerous this had become. Still, he didn't pull away. That night, after he escorted her back to her room, Emily caught his sleeve before he could leave. "Adrian?" He looked down at her, his heart hammering. "Thank you, not just for the medicine or the treatment, but for seeing me, for not looking at me like I'm broken." Her words sank deep, and for the first time, Adrian didn't respond as a doctor. He bent down slightly, meeting her eyes with an honesty that scared him. "You're not broken, Emily. You're the bravest person I know." Their eyes locked, and in that quiet moment, both knew something more than medicine bound them together now. The next few weeks tested both of them. Emily's health swung like a pendulum. Some days she cracked jokes with the nurses. Other days she could barely lift her head. Through it all, Adrian remained steady, though inside, the weight of his emotions grew heavier. He told himself he was only doing his job, but he knew the truth. Each time she smiled through the pain, each time her hand lingered in his, he was slipping further from the boundary he had sworn never to cross. One morning, he walked into her room to find her sketchbook open on the bed. Emily was fast asleep, her breathing shallow, her skin pale. Adrian picked up the sketchbook gently, curiosity winning over professionalism. Page after page he saw her drawings, flowers, stars, bits of the hospital, and then near the back he froze. There was a portrait, his portrait. It wasn't perfect, but it was unmistakably him. His sharp jawline, the tired eyes softened with kindness. Beneath it, in her neat handwriting, were 3 simple words. "My safe place." Adrian's throat tightened. He set the book down just as Emily stirred awake. Her eyes widened when she noticed where his gaze had been. "You weren't supposed to see that," she said, embarrassed. "Emily," he began, but she shook her head. "Don't say anything. I know it's wrong. You're my doctor and I'm your patient. But when I draw you, it's the only time I feel strong. Like I'm not just waiting for the next bad day." Adrian's chest ached. He wanted to tell her she wasn't alone, that she had become the only reason he looked forward to his long shifts. But instead, he sat beside her and gently took her hand. "You're not wrong," he said quietly, "and you don't have to apologize for feeling." Her eyes searched his, and for a long moment they sat in silence, their hands entwined, their hearts louder than the beeping machines around them. Later that night, after finishing his rounds, Adrian found himself standing outside her room again. He shouldn't go in. Every part of him knew that. But when he saw her awake, staring at the ceiling with tears streaming down her face, he couldn't walk away. He stepped inside. "Bad night?" Emily quickly wiped her eyes. I keep wondering if I'll ever get to live outside this hospital again. If I'll ever get to taste freedom, to do the things on my list." Adrian sat beside her bed. "You will," he said firmly. "You don't know that," she whispered. "No," he admitted, his voice breaking slightly. "But I believe it. And until then, I'll be here. Every step. You're not facing this alone." Emily's breath hitched as she whispered, "Why are you so good to me, Adrian?" His answer slipped out before he could stop it. "Because you matter to me more than you should." Her eyes widened, and for a heartbeat, the world stopped. Neither spoke, but the truth hung between them, undeniable and irreversible. The confession lingered in the air like electricity. After Adrian's words, "Because you matter to me more than you should," Emily couldn't bring herself to speak. Her chest tightened, not from the illness this time, but from the weight of feelings she had never expected to experience within these sterile hospital walls. The next morning, she pretended nothing had happened. She cracked jokes with the nurses, asked Adrian about his coffee addiction, and sketched little doodles in her journal. But whenever their eyes met, something unspoken passed between them. Something fragile, dangerous and undeniable. Adrian struggled too. He reviewed her charts with precision, prescribed medications with his usual care. Yet every time he looked at her, the doctor in him blurred into the man he had buried under years of discipline. One evening, Emily asked him to sit with her. "Not as my doctor," she clarified. "Just as Adrian." He hesitated, but then nodded. For the first time, they talked without medical jargon. She told him about her childhood summers at the lake, about how she used to collect seashells and write silly poems. He told her about his mother's apple pie, about how he once dreamed of traveling to Europe, but never had the time. As the conversation deepened, Emily asked, "Do you ever regret it? Choosing this life?" Adrian leaned back, sighing. "Sometimes. Medicine gave me purpose, but it also took away everything else. I haven't let anyone in for years. Until you." Her eyes softened. then maybe I was meant to end up here. Not just to fight cancer, but to remind you how to feel. His heart pounded at her words. He wanted to tell her she was already changing him in ways he couldn't explain, but he knew how fragile her health was, how uncertain the future remained. So instead he whispered, "You've already reminded me." That night, Emily had a bad reaction to her treatment. Nausea and weakness overtook her, and Adrian stayed by her side long after his shift ended. He held her hand through the worst of it, whispering steady reassurances. At one point, exhausted and trembling, Emily looked at him through watery eyes. "Why do you stay?" "Because you're not just a patient to me anymore," he said firmly. Her lips trembled into a faint smile. "You're breaking the rules, Dr. Hayes." "I know," he admitted. "And for once in my life, I don't care." She reached for his hand, squeezing it gently. "Then maybe, I don't care either." The room fell into silence, broken only by the soft hum of machines. But in that silence, something unshakable was born. A love neither of them planned, but both of them desperately needed. The following days were a test of restraint for Adrian. Every time he stepped into Emily's room, his heart raced with emotions he could no longer deny. But with every glance at her medical chart, the doctor inside him screamed warnings. This was not supposed to happen. He was supposed to stay objective, detached, professional. Yet when Emily smiled at him, weak but radiant, those rules felt irrelevant. One morning, as he adjusted her IV, Emily teased, "You're awfully quiet today. Dr. Hayes, did someone forget to give you your coffee?" Adrian smirked but shook his head. "Just thinking." "About what?" she pressed. "About things I probably shouldn't be," he admitted softly. Her eyes searched his face, curious. "Like what?" Adrian froze. If he confessed everything, it could ruin his career, his reputation, and maybe even her trust. But keeping it inside felt like suffocating. Like how it's becoming harder every day to see you only as my patient. Emily's breath caught. She wanted to reply, but her voice faltered. Deep down, she had known. She had felt it in the way his eyes lingered a moment too long, in the way his touch carried more gentleness than necessary. I don't want to complicate things for you," she whispered finally. "You're not complicating things," he said firmly, meeting her gaze. "You're making me feel human again." Tears threatened to spill from Emily's eyes, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming tenderness in his voice. For so long, she had been defined by her illness, reduced to scans, tests, statistics. But Adrian saw her, the girl who loved to write, who once chased fireflies, who still dreamed despite everything. Still, doubt gnawed at her. "But what if this ends badly? What if I—" She stopped, unable to say the word die. Adrian's jaw tightened. Don't go there. You're fighting, and I'm fighting with you." For the first time in weeks, Emily reached out and touched his face. "You're too good, Adrian. Maybe too good for me." He closed his eyes, savoring the touch he had craved but never allowed himself to want. "You're wrong. You're exactly what I need." At that moment, a nurse entered the room, breaking the intensity of their exchange. Adrian quickly stepped back, pulling his professional mask over his emotions. But inside, his heart was trembling. Later that night, alone in his office, he stared at her latest test results. The treatments were working slowly, but progress was fragile. He should have felt relief, but instead he felt fear. Fear of losing her. Fear of crossing a line that could destroy everything. Yet fear of doing nothing and living with regret. As he leaned back in his chair, he whispered to himself, "What am I doing?" And though no one heard, the answer was clear in his heart. He was falling in love with her. The next week unfolded like a fragile dream. Adrian and Emily had crossed an invisible boundary, one that neither of them could pretend didn't exist anymore. Every conversation now carried an unspoken warmth, every silence a tension that spoke louder than words. Emily felt it most in the quiet evenings, when the hospital hallways dimmed and the world seemed to shrink to just the two of them. She had never thought love could bloom in a place where suffering lingered in every corner, but somehow, Adrian had brought light into her darkest days. One evening, as the rain tapped softly against the window, Emily found herself holding a journal in her lap. She had been writing again, something she hadn't done since her diagnosis. Words poured out of her like confessions she could never speak aloud. When Adrian entered with his usual gentle knock, she quickly closed the journal. But he noticed the smile tugging at her lips. "Caught you hiding something?" he teased lightly, pulling a chair beside her bed. "Just some thoughts," she replied. "Nothing medical, I promise." "I wouldn't mind reading them someday," he said, half joking, half hoping. Emily looked at him for a long moment. "Maybe someday. For now, I'd rather just say what's in my heart." Her sudden seriousness startled him. "Emily," she took a breath. her voice trembling yet steady. Adrian, I've been scared. Not just of the cancer, but of how I feel when you're around. At first I thought it was wrong, that I was just clinging to you. Because you're the only good thing left in this hospital. But it's not that. It's more. Adrian's chest tightened. Every instinct told him to protect her, to shield her from extra burdens. But this wasn't a burden. This was her truth. I feel it too, he admitted, his voice low. More than I should. More than I ever expected. But Emily, I don't want to hurt you. I don't want you to think my care for you as a doctor is mixed with anything less than absolute devotion to your recovery. Her eyes softened. Adrian, don't you see? That's exactly why I trust you. Because I know you're not careless with hearts. Not even your own. The silence between them stretched, heavy and tender. Adrian reached for her hand, and this time, he didn't pull back. Their fingers intertwined, a fragile promise in the midst of uncertainty. Emily leaned her head against the pillow, tears glistening in her eyes. If I have to face this fight, I want to face it knowing that someone sees me as more than just a patient. I want to face it with you. Adrian squeezed her hand, his own eyes wet. Then you will. I'm not going anywhere, Emily. Not now. Not ever. For the first time since her diagnosis, Emily didn't feel like she was fighting alone. And for the first time in his career, Adrian realized that love could be both the most dangerous risk and the most healing medicine of all. The following days should have felt hopeful. Emily's last tests had shown slight improvement, and Adrian had allowed himself a rare smile when he saw the numbers. But hope is fragile, and in hospitals, it often shatters without warning. It was late at night when Adrian received the urgent page. Emily Carter, room 312. His heart sank before he even read the rest. She was in distress. Rushing through the halls, he burst into her room to find nurses surrounding her bed. Emily was gasping for breath, her face pale, sweat beading her forehead. The monitors screamed in protest as her oxygen levels plummeted. Get me 10 liters of O2 now, Adrian barked, his professional instincts taking over. His hands were steady, but inside, panic clawed at him. This wasn't just another patient. This was Emily. As they worked to stabilize her, Emily's eyes flickered open. She saw Adrian leaning over her, his face tight with focus, his voice commanding the room. For a moment, she wasn't afraid because he was there. Hours passed before the crisis eased. Emily finally drifted into a restless sleep, stabilized but fragile. Adrian sat beside her bed long after the other staff left. Exhaustion tugged at him, but he couldn't move. He held her hand, his thumb brushing gently over her skin as if reassuring both of them she was still there. When Emily stirred awake, her voice was weak but clear. I thought I was leaving tonight. Adrian's throat tightened. Don't you dare say that? Not when you've come this far. She gave a faint smile. You can't control everything, Dr. Hayes, not even me. Maybe not, he admitted, his voice breaking. But I can fight with you. I will fight with you. Every second, until you're better. Her eyes softened as she studied him. Adrian, you look so tired. You've given me so much of yourself. What if this doesn't end the way we want? He leaned closer, his hand still clasping hers. Then I'll still be here. I don't care how it ends. I care that you know you are loved. That you're not just a case file or a statistic. You're Emily, my Emily. Tears slid down her cheeks. She had long feared being remembered only as the girl with cancer. But Adrian had given her something. Elsa, the gift of being seen, cherished, loved. I'm scared, she whispered. I know, he said gently, resting his forehead against her hand. But you don't have to be scared alone anymore. The monitors beeped steadily in the background, a fragile reminder of the thin line she was walking. And as the night deepened, both knew the fight was far from over. For Adrian, the battle was no longer just medical. It was personal. And for Emily, survival was no longer just about living. It was about living for love. The days after Emily's crisis were tense. Though she had stabilized, her scans showed a troubling reality. The cancer was spreading faster than expected. The treatments that had once shown promise were losing their strength. Adrian sat in his office late into the night, her charts spread out before him. He rubbed his temples, exhaustion weighing on him. The answer was there, a new experimental treatment. But it was unapproved, unpredictable and risky. If it failed, it could accelerate her decline. If it worked, it might give her a chance at life. He knew what the medical guidelines would say. Play it safe, extend her comfort, manage symptoms, but his heart screamed something different. Fight harder. Give her every chance, no matter the risk. The next morning, Emily noticed the heaviness in his eyes. You've been carrying something, she said softly. Adrian hesitated, then sat down beside her. There's a treatment. Something new. It's risky, Emily, very risky. But it could help. She studied him quietly, her frail hands resting on the blanket. And what does the cautious, responsible Dr. Hayes recommend? The doctor in me says no, he admitted. But the man who can't imagine losing you. He stopped, his voice cracking. He's begging you to try. Emily reached for his hand, her touch light but steady. Adrian, I don't want you to lose yourself for me, if it's too dangerous. No, he cut in firmly, his eyes blazing. This isn't just about medicine anymore. This is about giving you every chance to live the life you deserve. I can't stand by and watch you fade when there's even a possibility, no matter how small, that you could fight longer. Tears filled her eyes. She had never seen him so vulnerable, so desperate. For weeks she had tried to protect him from her fears. But now she saw the truth. He was fighting as hard as she was. Adrian, she whispered, I don't want to die wondering what might have been. If you believe in this, then I believe in you. For a moment, the room was silent except for the steady hum of machines. Adrian squeezed her hand, a storm of emotions raging inside him. Relief, fear, hope, all tangled together. I'll fight for you, he promised, his voice trembling but resolute. Even if it means risking everything, I'll fight. Emily smiled through her tears. Then let's take the risk, together. Adrian nodded, but deep down he knew what was at stake. This wasn't just about medical records or ethics anymore. This was about love, raw, dangerous, and undeniable. As he left the room to prepare, one thought echoed in his mind. This could save her, or this could destroy them both. The sterile chill of the treatment room felt different that morning. It wasn't just another procedure, it was a leap of faith. The experimental therapy had been prepared carefully, every vial and monitor in place. But for Adrian, the room felt like a battlefield, where he was about to gamble with the life of the woman he loved. Emily sat in the chair, pale but calm. She looked at him with a courage that startled him. You look more nervous than I do, she teased softly. Adrian forced a small smile, adjusting the IV line with hands that trembled despite years of training. That's because I know exactly what could go wrong. And I know what could go right, she countered gently. Let's focus on that. The treatment began. The slow drip of the experimental drug flowed into Emily's veins, and the machines beeped steadily, measuring every change. Adrian stayed by her side, his eyes fixed on the monitors, his heart pounding with every fluctuation. Minutes stretched into hours. Emily's body reacted with waves of weakness, nausea, and pain. Several times Adrian considered stopping, his medical instincts screaming at him. But every time he looked at her, she gave him a faint nod, silently telling him to keep going. At one point she whispered, Adrian, do you remember when I told you I used to chase fireflies as a kid? Yes, he said quickly, leaning closer. This feels like that, she murmured, her voice faint. Like I'm reaching for something glowing even if it slips away. But I'd rather reach than sit in the dark. Her words nearly broke him, but they also reminded him why they were there. He brushed her hair back from her forehead. Then hold on, Emily. Don't let go of the light. By evening, the treatment was finished. Emily was exhausted, her body trembling from the strain. But she was still breathing, still fighting. Adrian stayed with her long after the nurses left, refusing to leave her side. When she stirred awake, her voice was weak but steady. Was it worth the risk? He took her hand, pressing it to his lips. Every second. Because you're still here. She smiled faintly. Then promise me something, Adrian. Promise me that even if this doesn't work, you won't regret loving me. Tears burned his eyes, but he didn't look away. Emily, loving you is the only thing I'll never regret. Not in this lifetime, not in any. She closed her eyes, holding on to his words as tightly as she held on to life itself. And as the machines beeped softly in the background, Adrian realized that no matter what happened next, they had already won something far greater than medicine could ever give. Love, strong enough to fight death itself. The days after the treatment were agonizing. Adrian barely slept, monitoring Emily's vitals through every hour of the night. Her body was fragile, but she fought with a quiet strength that humbled him. By the third morning, the results began to trickle in. Her white blood cell count was stable. Her oxygen levels, once dangerously low, had risen slightly. The scan showed something almost impossible. The aggressive spread of the cancer had slowed. It wasn't a miracle cure, but it was hope. Real, tangible hope. Adrian nearly broke down in the hallway when he saw the numbers. For weeks he had lived in fear of losing her. But now, for the first time, he dared to imagine a future. When he returned to Emily's room, she was sitting up, pale but smiling. You look like a man who's just been given a second life, she teased. He crossed the room in 2 strides, taking her hand. Emily, it's working. The treatment, It's slowing things down. Her eyes widened, tears spilling freely. Are you saying I'll have more time? Yes, he said firmly, his voice trembling with emotion. Time to heal, time to live, time to love. Emily let out a shaky laugh, covering her mouth with her hand. I didn't think I'd get to hear something like that again. Adrian leaned closer, his forehead resting against hers. You're going to hear it every day for as long as I'm alive. Because I love you, Emily. I loved you the moment you smiled at me in this hospital bed. And I'll keep loving you no matter where this road takes us. Her tears turned into quiet sobs as she wrapped her frail arms around him. I love you too, Adrian. I don't know how much time we'll have, but whatever it is, it's enough. Because it's with you. The weeks that followed were unlike any they had imagined. Emily's health remained fragile, but her strength grew slowly. The experimental treatment gave her more stability, enough to walk in the hospital gardens, enough to feel the sun on her skin again. One afternoon, Adrian wheeled her outside. The sky was painted in shades of gold and pink, the air cool and gentle. Emily tilted her face toward the light and whispered, I used to think my story would end in a hospital bed, but now I think it ends in love. Adrian kissed her hand, his heart full. No, Emily, this isn't the end. This is just the beginning. For both of them, the future was uncertain. There would still be battles, still be fears. But for the first time, those fears no longer defined them. What defined them was love. The kind born not in perfect moments, but in the darkest hours, when two souls chose to fight together. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, Adrian Hayes and Emily Carter held on to each other, knowing that whatever tomorrow held, they had already won the most important victory of all, finding each other.